Today is the 17th of November. Welcome to Questions with LA. I am your intrepid host, LA Marzulli. We'll get into your questions, but first, a word from our trusted sponsor. Did you know that the aging process starts as early as the age of 25? After that, you start to lose about 1% of your collagen supply every year. Folks, try this at-home test. I have, to see if you've got enough collagen. Pinch your skin. If it immediately bounces back, then you have enough collagen in your skin. If it doesn't bounce back or fold back immediately, then you might need a collagen supplement. Multi-collagen helps rejuvenate your body from the inside out with 5 supercharged types of collagen your body needs for optimal health. Give it a try. Your health is your wealth after all. Taste, inspect, and judge risk-free for yourself. If it doesn't live up to your expectations, this is an incredible deal, ladies and gentlemen. You have a full 60 days to get a complete refund, no questions asked. Plus, you'll get 51% off, along with several free bonuses included at no extra cost. Go to the link below, healthwithla.com, healthwithla.com. Folks, I take it every day. I've said this before, and I got to say it again. I'm a fan of the Rocky and Bullwinkle show, and there was a segment on that called Mr. Know-It-All, where Rocky would introduce Mr. Know-It-All, of course, who was Bullwinkle the Moose. And it was all tongue-in-cheek and, typical from Jay Ward, the creator of Rocky and Bullwinkle. And I do a pretty good Bullwinkle impersonation, by the way. So I kind of feel like Mr. Know-It-All here. I mean, I'm really not. Sometimes I look at some of these questions and I wonder about them. And so I'll get online and do some research on them and see if I can come up with some answers. But most of this, after 42 years of studying the biblical prophetic narrative and being immersed in the Word and, of course, producing films and writing books and doing research and talking to people like Gary Stearman, Dr. Chuck Missler, Dr. I.D.E. Thomas, and others who were served as mentors in some ways to me over the years. So there's like an accumulation of knowledge, biblical knowledge, certainly not worldly knowledge. So let's get right into it. I will do my best, but I am not Mr. Know-It-All, and I don't have all the answers. Frankly, no one does. Here we go from Kathleen. Why are ghosts or spirits of the dead seen by people? Okay. Some have seen a little child playing happily in an old home and found out that there was a little child who died many years ago there. Some see creepy ghosts. Some see sad ghosts. Some people see sweet children. Why are these apparitions manifesting? Are they all bad? Or are some of the spirits of dead people who are still wandering around the earth? And why would not the spirit of a child, let's say, be up in heaven rather than on earth? It's a really complex question. In fact, some other people wrote in with the same idea or the same questions, wondering about this. Here's my take on it. Is it possible that a spirit can get stuck? That's a possibility. And, to your point, why isn't a child who would die be up in heaven? And I get that. I'll just tell you what's out there, okay? What I have heard and not necessarily what I believe. But there's a scenario where, the tunnel of light, and you go through that tunnel of light and you're escorted by the angels and you go to heaven. But some people allegedly miss that entrance into the tunnel or refuse to go into the tunnel or don't want to go into the tunnel. I have trouble with that because it gives us control. What I think we're looking at here, demons, the demonic, can imitate those who have been departed. Specifically, if there are occult underpinnings in a home like that, if there's been blood spilled in an area, this is why, let's say at Gettysburg, we see so-called apparitions that are there. And people have photographed these, what they look like Confederate soldiers or Union soldiers. Well, blood was spilled on the ground. Blood acts as a gateway, as a portal to maybe have some of these entities manifest. They will mimic those whose blood was spilled, essentially. That's another position. Then, of course, we've got the idea, circling back to the first one, that these people are stuck here and they don't want to leave. And so they wander. That's another possibility. The bottom line is, folks, we don't know. We really don't know. The Witch of Endor is a perfect example of that. When she does call up Samuel, doesn't she? And it's the real Samuel. So how does that work? And again, I don't have all the answers. Those are my thoughts on it. Well, I hope that answered your question. This is from Stephen, and He's a real smart guy. So some years ago, I sent you a paper I wrote for my master's in theology. Included in the paper is my theological theory of everything, which using the presupposition that consciousness is the fundamental or the fundament of our reality and is energy that God created and maintains the universe via initial act of consciousness, where a field of energy in the form of strings, that's string theory of course, was projected and then God chose what frequencies to vibrate those strings and thus creates any combination of mass and the fundamental forces, thus manifesting and maintaining our perceived reality. Very possible. It's way beyond my pay grade, Steve, to be honest with you. Now he goes into the story. In addition, I told you a story about when I was 5, and I was introduced to another 5-year-old with 6 digits on each hand, red hair, and 2 rows of teeth. He was very tall. So this 5-year-old boy was very tall. I was introduced to him in my front yard with the adults inside. When I noticed and mentioned the aberrations, the other boy became upset, and the encounter was terminated. I never saw him again. What are my thoughts on that? It's really dangerous because to assume that someone, just because they have red hair, double rows of teeth, and 6 fingers, are a Nephilim. Are those some of the genetic characteristics of Nephilim? Yeah, they are. But just because someone has a 6 digit doesn't mean that they're Nephilim. Or double rows of teeth. All these things can just be genetic. What's interesting is that the Nephilim did have those characteristics, but they're in a fixed state. So I don't know what you encountered, but we've got to be really careful with that because it sets up to discriminate against someone that just has a genetic aberration that is not a Nephilim. Okay, I want to make that really clear. So thank you, Steve, for writing in. This is from Glenn. Hey, LA, have you looked into Rockwall, Texas? I have seen documentaries on it, and they attribute it to a natural formation. I've been to Rockwall. Richard Shaw and I went and we filmed there. It was really basically a nothing burger. No one even knew about it when we were there. This is years ago, before Scotty Walter went there and did an expose. They uncovered the wall, and Scotty looked at it and declared it was just a natural rock formation. There's some really interesting dynamics at Rockwall. For instance, allegedly, right under City Hall, there was this cavern that was where the giants were buried. Now, that's a great story. When we went there and we were nosing around and asking people, no one had any idea of what we were talking about. So it's in our film. I think it's in Watchers 2. You can check that out if you're interested by going to streaming.lamarzulli.net. And I believe it's Watchers 2 where we were at Rockwall. It was sort of a nothing burger for us. So the other question that this person, Glenn, has had for a long time, who are they that Cain references when he is exiled by God? I am a graduate of secular school in anthropology. Rare to find a Christian in the study. No, I get that, Glenn. I understand that. This was used at the Scopes Monkey trial. Where did Cain get his wife from? Well, here's the deal. We know that Adam and Eve lived for 900 years. So let's say Seth, where did he get his wife from? Now, Adam and Eve had many sons and daughters. They lived for 9 years. They were constantly procreating, in my opinion. And from that, they would marry, the offspring would marry their siblings, because that's all they had. They would marry their siblings. Before the flood, their genetics were completely different than they are now, than we have in our bodies now. I think that's a safe assumption to say. In other words, we only live maximum, 100 years, 105 years, 110 years. Most of us pass away, 60, 70, 80. Some of us live into the 90s. So when Adam and Eve had children, who did Seth marry, right? I mean, just think about that. If there are other races that are here, then it throws the whole Genesis account completely out the window. But they're not. They were marrying their brothers and sisters. It's just like after the flood. Notice that there's only 8 people on the ark. So who are they marrying? They're marrying blood relatives, and they can do that for a period of time. And then it changes, and we get into the laws of Moses. But that's hundreds and hundreds of years later. So apparently it was okay. God allowed it to marry sisters, brothers, and they would create more people. I realize that when you talk about that, people smirk and they laugh and they But I'm a biblical literalist, and I think that's what happened. So that's who Cain married. Cain married basically his sister, in my opinion. Hope that answers your question. This is from Donna. Thank you for your knowledge and teachings about the fallen angels and their offspring, as I have learned so much from you and others with similar beliefs. I am still learning about the pre-Adamic age. I understand there must have been a thriving existence of angels before we were created. But I wonder if other humanoid type of people and animals existed with them. When Lucifer and his angels rebelled, did that lead to the destruction of the humanoids and animals of that era? If so, did they have free will like us and choose to follow him? Or did they not have free will and were doomed in serving the rebellious angels? Or had they become hybrids from the rebellion? I guess I am just trying to understand what existed before our creation. Something happens, and I realize that people with a very truncated view of the biblical narrative, everything's created 6,000 years ago. I don't believe that for a minute. I believe that the age of the universe is perhaps millions or billions of years old. We don't know. And certainly, the angels aren't created and then, 24 hours later, Satan leads a rebellion? That makes no sense at all. I think the rebellion happened over eons of time. I also believe that dinosaurs were the creation. He combined the DNA in some way. He doesn't really create anything, but he uses what's there to create these monstrosities. And they're all wiped out, aren't they? They're all wiped out. As for human footprints walking with the dinosaurs, how do we know that they're human? I remember talking to a guy from, I won't even mention the ministry, and the gentleman was pointing out to the human footprints that are found allegedly next to dinosaurs in the dry riverbed in Texas. And I said, well, how do you know they're human and not angelic? And he just went, no one had ever asked him that question before. They just assumed they were all human. We don't know that. That's an assumption. And so we don't know whether that was a fallen angel walking with the dinosaur or next to a dinosaur or tracking the dinosaur. We have no idea. Just something to think about. Here's the bottom line. We don't know. That's part of the mystery that surrounds us. Where does these ancient megalithic structures, if I can digress just for a minute, but I think it's to your point, Donna, that where does Sacsayhuaman come from in Peru, those huge megalithic walls that we see? How was that done? It certainly is not the Inca. No way. Is it pre-flood? Tim Alberino and I think it is, but there's no way to tell. There is a hidden history that's been deliberately obfuscated from the peoples of the world. There was definitely genetic tampering in the days of Noah. We know that when the 200 Watcher angels came down on Mount Hermon, created the oath, that's the whole counter move, how the Nephilim returned after the flood. But here's something to think about. It's not a weekend frat party. That tampering with the genetics and the genome goes on for about 400 years, at least, maybe even longer. And this is where the chimeras come from, because we know from the book of Enoch that these fallen angels sinned against the animal kingdom and created these chimeras. This is why everything is destroyed, except the animals on the ark that are genetically pure, and of course Noah and his wife, genetically pure, and his sons wives. So they're all procreating, going back a few questions earlier, in the same gene pool, aren't they? But they're allowed to do that for whatever reason, because they're still living 500, 600, 700 years, and their DNA isn't as corrupted as ours is now. Again, do with that what you will. Let's move on. I hope that answers your questions, and thanks for writing in. If you have a question, it's questions@lamarzulli.net, questions@lamarzulli.net. This is a question on the Greys. It's from Glim, a brother in Ireland. Pretty cool, huh? Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it. The Lord's blessing to you and your family, LA. Thank you, sir. Do you think the Greys and the craft are for use on Earth? Or are they prepared for the war in heaven? And maybe their appearances on Earth is an after effect of that war preparation. They will all get cast out of the second heaven anyway, but until that time, they might remain behind the veil. I think that they use the craft to move the Greys from one place to another. I do. I don't think the Greys can bilocate. Now, I could be wrong in that, and that's conjecture on my part, and I'll admit it. I think the craft are used for two things. One, to move the Greys around, but also to pick up the people, and that's in our Abduction film. They pick up the people, and they transport them via a beam of light through the walls, through the ceiling, through the window, into the ship, where they take sperm from the men, ovum from the women. But when Michael and his angels fight with the dragon and his angels, and I call it the Great Eviction Notice, and they're booted from the second heaven, woe to the inhabitants of earth, because the dragon, Satan, your accuser, is here and he knows his time is short. He's now stuck in the space-time continuum that we're all stuck in. He's not in the second heaven. He no longer has access to the second heaven, nor to the third heaven where allegedly he accuses us day and night before the throne. And that's where Jesus goes, no, not so fast. But the Great Eviction Notice will happen. Does that set up the coming Great Deception? Could be. Is that when we see a myriad of ships just appear on the planet? Could be. Lots of things. You see, this is the thing. We have a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. I don't have all the answers, but I'll give you my best on that particular question. And I think that these ships are constructs. They are. There is technology in the third heaven. Why? Because we know, and I'll say it again, when Elijah is there with his servant, surrounded by the Syrian army, and the servant Gehazi is kind of freaked out. What are we to do? And Elisha says, hey, Lord, please open my servant's eyes. The servant goes out, and what does he say? I saw the chariots of fire above the Syrian army. What are the chariots of fire? Remember, he's seeing something through his grid. The terms UFO are not invented yet. That comes centuries later, right? Millennia later. So he's looking at something, and all he has in his wheelhouse are fire and a chariot. A chariot is the mode of transportation of the day. Chariots of fire. What does that sound like to you? Above the Syrian army? In my opinion, those were UFOs. Gary Stearman saw a UFO, which he believed saved his life. It was an angelic encounter. Do both sides use them? Perhaps. I don't know. But here's the deal. If you ask me, what do you really think? I think, yes, there's technology, and both sides use them. Pastor Matt Freeman asked the Lord if he could see one of the good guys. That was his prayer. So he's on a flight, and he's, waiting and waiting and waiting. He finds says, Lord, I haven't seen anything yet. And the Lord says, be patient, wait. And there, as the plane's coming in for a landing, it's on approach. All of a sudden in the distance, he sees this white orange light, and it comes right next to the plane, and it's a disc. And it's one of the good guys. So, look, a lot of things, happen here. And I'll say it again, we don't have all the answers. Some of it's conjecture, a lot of it's speculation on my part, but it's based on decades of research. This is from David. The planet is about to be turned right side up, similar to the Exodus before. This one is worldwide and called the Great Exodus, not the one world government's time. Satan overplayed his hand again. Worldwide, we will all be freed from the slavery and oppression we were born into. So this is the statement. This will be the time for revival, praise, celebration, and union in the body of Christ. The world reset, refreshed, and restored retroactively the way Jesus meant it to be from the start. After the great flood, they will still enslaved us and took away our God-given freedoms and liberty. This is not the end times. It is the time for everyone to know Jesus and that he is the only one who could have done what is going to be done. A time to praise Jesus and to get to know him, not the way we have been cultured and bored into. We will all feel it is a dream. How could this happen to me? Jesus loves us and will, during this time, restore all of us in every aspect of our life. It will be your time, LA, and get ready. You will blossom in your obedient work because part of the reset is truth about all. Saying that, my question is, what do you think? This is from David. I respectfully disagree with you. These are the end times. There's not going to be a great reset. In my opinion, we don't see that at all. We see the church ages, and we see finally the church age allowed to see in church, which is where I believe we are now, where we're neither either hot nor cold, but lukewarm. Truth is thrown to the street. These are the days of Noah, on steroids, by the way. I see nothing in the biblical narrative before the time of Christ where there's a revival. In fact, I see exactly the opposite. I see an apostasia, a great falling away. So respectfully, I completely disagree on all points. I think we are headed into the time of Jacob's trouble. We're not there yet, but we're seeing all sorts of signs. Wars, rumors of wars, famines, pestilence, earthquakes in diverse places, troublesome times. Men faint from fearfulness coming upon the earth. I think we're here. I think the Lord's return is soon. I'm not a date setter, but we're certainly inching our way, slouching towards, if I can use that analogy, we're slouching towards the apocalypse. There was talk of saber rattling a couple of weeks ago about the use of nukes. I mean, seriously? Look at the earthquakes through the roof, volcanic activity. It's like this, it goes up. It's not going away, it's accelerating, which is why I used to call the radio show that we did Acceleration Radio, but I digress. This is from Stella. My name is Stella. Thank you for your program and time. It's nice to have this kind of information and confirmation of the supernatural. We saw a documentary on Tubi about Stan Romanek. It seems convincing. Do you know if this is a true account? Thank you so much. I've watched some of that. The late Richard Shaw and I talked about it. It's sketchy. I'm not there. I don't know. You know, you have Stan's word that these encounters are taking place. What I do know is that people are abducted. There's no doubt about that. The phenomenon is absolutely real. That's why our fourth film is about to be released. So something is going on. Stan maintains that what happened and the entities that he saw and interacted with are real. And the photography looks somewhat convincing, but there's a lot of nonsense out there. What I can tell you is this. In our film, there are 4 people that have been abducted. All of them have been taken. All of them. There's no collusion between the 4 of them. And we set them down at a Zoom chat and we talk about this, talk about their abductions, talk about going through the window, going through the ceiling. Something is going on, and I believe it's part of the breeding program that Chuck Missler warned us about years ago. Stephen Greer. This is about Stephen Greer. This is from Anna. Can you comment on the ufologist Dr. Stephen Greer and his CE5 contact protocol? At first, this confused me. What on earth was he making contact with? Until I found your work and how all of these things now, in my opinion, have a biblical explanation. Am I correct that what Dr. Greer is encouraging through his contact protocol is what God strictly forbids? Look, I would love to sit down with Stephen Greer and go head-to-head with him. These are not warm entities from some star system someplace. They are demonic. How do you account for taking a 5-year-old against his will, against his parents' will, and abducting them? Welcome to Emil, who's in our fourth film. He's also in Watchers. He's the guy that we removed the implant from. They do horrific things. Karen states, when I ask her on the record in the film, this is why I honestly think, and this is no hyperbole on my part, that this film may be the most important film I've ever been involved in. And Gil Zimmerman, who's partnered up with us here, we've worked hard and long on this film, and it'll be released very shortly, very shortly. We're down to the wire here, and it goes to the duplicator probably today or tomorrow at the latest. So we'll have hard copy around Thanksgiving a little later. We will be doing a pre-sale, but I digress. The CE5 protocol, and what is Greer teaching? He's basically teaching Hinduism, Eastern mysticism. He's telling you to meditate and get in contact. I'm not buying that for a minute. I was with a guru. I know what that meditation does. I know it opens up and can open up the Kundalini serpent spirit. It is deception, in my opinion. Absolute deception. So while I respect Dr. Stephen Greer and his opinion, he's a real smart guy and he's entitled to his opinion, but I'm entitled to mine. And with all due respect, sir, and you're welcome to come on this program anytime and talk about it in a friendly sort of a way. But I believe that you're misled and you're misleading people. I believe that this phenomenon is cooked up in Hell's Kitchen, as the late Ross Dizdar would say. I believe that it is deception of the highest order, that these entities are posing as extraterrestrials, and other people like Dr. Jacques Vallée and J. Allen Hynek have stated so. They believe that these entities are interdimensional, not extraterrestrial. Hope that answers your question. And this is Catherine. Twice Jesus reassures his disciples that he's not a ghost. when he walks on water, and when he appears to them after the resurrection and eats something. The Lord seems gives credence to the fact that ghosts exist. This must be human dead. We are often taught that to which of Ender bringing up the soul of Samuel was a special case, but she did this for a living. Maybe necromancy is real and not the deceiving spirits we are told that manifest. Can you bring some more clarity to this phenomena? Catherine from Toronto. Well, we kind of talked about that earlier on in today's program. I believe that these souls, now get this, okay? Jesus is saying this to his disciples. This is before the souls have been released from the bosom of Abraham, right? So when he's walking on water, those souls have not yet been released. When he appears to them in the room and eats something, the question is, has he gone to the Father? You know, when he leads those souls that are captive into freedom. So up till that point, could necromancy be real? Very possible. Very possibly it was. As I said earlier, I believe where blood is spilled, it acts as a gateway for the demonic to impersonate those whose blood was spilled. There also is a possibility, I'll just reiterate this quickly, that souls can be stuck. Or let me put it this way. Is it possible that some souls can be stuck? I don't have the answer to that. Thanks so much for watching Questions with LA. If you have a question, please don't hesitate. Write us in, questions@lamarzulli.net, questions@lamarzulli.net, and we'll try to answer them right here. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you tomorrow with another episode of Supernatural Confrontations. Something very dark and disturbing is happening. It is a global phenomenon that knows no boundaries. It adheres to no cultural mores, and the ones who are engaged in this nefarious activity are beyond reproach. People are being taken against their will, in the cover of darkness, in the dead of night. They are subjected to bizarre examinations that are often sexual in nature. These people are terrified, violated, confused, and with no place to turn to, as who would believe them? This is their story.
No heartbeat. Ultrasound, no baby. DNC, no fetal tissue. There's nothing. I was clean. He's like, ma'am, are you sure you were pregnant? I'm like, this is my doctor. You can call her. I was pregnant. He's like, you didn't bleed all night. You don't have, nothing came. I'm like, no, nothing came out of me.